Part 3 of Introduction of A Treatise of Modern Falconry by James Campbell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. This poem I have translated as faithfully as my knowledge of the original Greek would give me leave, and if this attempt, with all the faults of it, which men of brighter parts than mine will readily discover, shall prompt some able hand to publish Nestorius in a poetic dress to the world, I will indulge the vanity of regarding my pains as not useless to public entertainment. If my brother sportsmen receive a pleasure from this extract equal to what I have always derived from it, there is no doubt but that some one of them, in whom a liberal education has given the last polish to a fine genius, will gratify his unlearned brethren with an elegant version of the whole. The man must be of a phlegmatic constitution, whose soul would not open to the raptures arising from the grand ideas of an extensive country, diversified into swelling hills covered with forests, into winding valleys divided by rivulets shaded with trees, into opening plains, where villages and arable grounds and irregular hedges, interspersed with standards, amuse the eye, and where the prospect is terminated by rocks and mountains, rising beyond each other in wild and awful confusion, till the blue mist, gently ascending from them, blend their vanishing tops with the sky. Then add to these the raptures flowing from the ideas of such a vast train of falconers and assistants, under the command and animated to exert their best abilities by the presence of the gigantic Arambamboberus, himself keen in the enjoyment of the princely diversion, and ready to pour out his liberties on such as distinguish themselves by their cheerfulness, dexterity, and spirit. Then to think of such a great number of dogs, springing game at every step to 200 hawks, circling through the air, and eager to attack the fowls as fast as they rose from the thickets. Then the battle of eagles, where was seen all the variety of stratagem and fury which the noblest of birds could display against the largest of their race. Then the varying passions and exclamations and gestures of the beholders, according to the different turns of the combat and their different interests in the opposite sides. Heavens, it is impossible to call up so glorious a scene in the imagination, without feeling all the transporting raptures which the sublimest sport is capable of inspiring. These ideas are full of the most exalted enthusiasm. I proceed further to lay before the reader the state of falconry in Persia and Hindostan, as it was in the days of the sapient and anecdotal Abul Faraj. He was given us the following account of it. This writer was, at the beginning of the 13th century, born in Malatya, a city near the source of the Euphrates, and flourished in psychic theology and history. But it is to the last that he owes his renown. Everybody who has read his works in the proper edition must know that the Sophie of Persia, as well as Arambamboberus, kills deer with his hawks of egregious strength and bulk. This monarch, says Abul, of illustrious pedigree, disdaining groveling pastimes, pursues the princely diversion of the sky, exalts his high station, and towering as his glorious soul. The way of training hawks to deer in Persia is easy and natural, and may be followed by any person who possesses a deer park. For this purpose, the Sophie falconers employ a wooden lure, made exactly into the form of a deer's head, covered neatly with the skin stripped off the head of the animal, and adorned with a pair of comely horns. Between these and under the skin is first a thin cushion, on which they place the hawk, and wherein she sinks her pounces, and the sockets of the eyes below are filled with the eyes of bulls, horses, cows, camels, or of any other large creatures. They teach the hawk to fly to this lure, and as she stands between the horns, to bend down her head and tear out with her beak the eyes that are crammed in the sockets. But in order to accustom the bird to bear the motions of the deer, which are exceeding violent, when the creature feels his eyes attacked, They jog the lure gently at first, while she feeds on it, and gradually accelerate the concussions to the utmost quickness. When they have brought her to bear all the disturbance they can give her by the strength of their arms, they fix the lure on the circumference of a wheel, which at the beginning they turn softly, in contrary directions, and proceed gradually to the most sudden jerks. This is the most difficult and severe part of the training of their hawks, and most of them are killed by it. But a hawk which gets safe through it will keep her balance amidst the most irregular shocks any deer can give her. A hawk bred to this perfection is accordingly above all price, and the richest present in the power of the Sophy to make his best esteemed allies. He receives it himself from his principal falconer with the highest pomp and exultation, and his subjects enter into his satisfaction with the sincerest and most sensible demonstrations of joy. Oh, how generous and cordial are your inferiors to you, yea, great, whom birth or accident as often as merit places on the luminous summits of life, and entitles to indulgence and respect. How solitary and insipid were your enjoyments! Did they not render them social and exhilarating and poignant by their smiles and participation? This cheerful concurrence of theirs with your felicity constitutes them your best friends and benefactors, and gives them a claim to your most active gratitude, which your hearts, dissipated by their kindness, often forget to acknowledge. Yes, you are dependent on those among whom you stand so eminent, and bound to return to their bosoms some enlivening drops of that cheerfulness and festivity which they pour without measure into yours. May therefore peevishness everlasting tear the soul, and gloominess everlasting darken the visage of the paltry wretch of opulence and distinction, who with unaccommodating sourness of aspect censors and damps the harmless mirth of his inferiors, who seek oblivion on their toils and anxieties in gaiety, jest, and copious laughter. Thus prayeth most devoutly Gregorius Abul Faraj, Eben Aaron Eben Hosima. The readiness of the lower ranks of men to go along with the happiness of their superiors is strikingly exemplified in the conduct of the Persians. Whenever their monarch receives a high-bred hawk, and I shall describe it for the amusement of such as were never in Persia upon these grand occasions, the great falconer of the crown, having bred a hawk to full perfection, dresses himself in the richest apparel, over which he throws the magnificent badges of his office, and walks accompanied with all the inferior officers to present it to his sovereign. The Sophy, advertised of his coming, receives him sitting on his throne, which is surrounded with many a prostrate lord, and takes the noble bird on his fist, where he surveys her with looks of joyous satisfaction. The moment his smiles announce his felicity, the royal palace resounds with the concert of violins, hautboys, clarinets, trumpets, bassoons, flutes, and kettle drums, in which the calls and howlings of the falconers are artfully interwoven with the music, and expressed with surprising liveliness by the instrument. The nobles about the throne then rise up, and copy into their own faces the alacrity which brightens and endears that of the prince, and each of them having admired and appraised the wonderful hawk according to their rank, the last returns it to the great falconer. Then they offer this majesty their humble felicitations on the fortunate event, and place that every hour may dance onward to him, scattering such and greater instances of good fortune. How great does every trifle appear when it is connected with a great man! He himself grows blind to its real insignificancy, and thinks it as important as the unconcerned part of the world know it to be frivolous, by his viewing it continually in the flattery of those who find their interest in multiplying the number of his agreeable dreams.
The value of most things depends on the light and situation wherein they are viewed, not on what they are in themselves. At least with regard to the Sophia's hawk, this is the case.
The ceremony of presenting the hawk being ended with infinite delight to every mortal who shared in honor of it, the first Secretary of State dispatches couriers to every part of the monarchy to inform the lieges of the inestimable acquisition made by their sovereign, that they may mingle their joys with his. This news fires the loyalty of the different provinces straight, and they delay not a moment to send ambassadors who have approved wisdom and discretion in making bows and compliments, to congratulate His Majesty on this immense addition to his royal bliss. Universal mirth prevails over the Persian dominions, demonstrated by bonfires, illuminations, volleys, carousals, and feasts. Feasts not of your ordinary cookery, but where you shall see 20 different dishes of opium dressed with laudanum and poppy sauce. Every mortal who can afford it is now arrayed in a new suit of green, with the image of a hawk set with carbuncles fixed on the tip of the nose. And the poor, to come as near their betters as they can, stitch on their rags such an enormous quantity of grass and leaves that they resemble so many moving loads of hay. The bashfulness of virgins, the reserve of matrons, the solemnity of judges, the reverence of priests, the importance of physicians, the awkward pedantry of tutors, the ferocity of soldiers, the graciousness of fine gentlemen, the elevation of nobility, the stateliness of gentry, all prominences of character, sink down and are lost in the pleasing torrent of mirth which flows from heart to heart and penetrates the inmost creeks of the soul. The Persians are now strangers, happy strangers, to the cares and distresses and calamities of life, under which they so lately labored, so absorbed in the joys of the present moment, that they recollect nothing of the past, and never look down the stream of time for the future. Every bosom swells with gladness, every eye glistens with pleasure, every mouth is lengthened with smiles, every tongue warbles the praises of the Sophy and his hawk, and everywhere you see the young and the old, the merry and the sedate, the foolish and the wise, animating the sprightly dance to the sound of footnote read. The original words are Parada, Simod, Karada, Mapikok, Simod, Trempelok, and signify the four sorts of quick music in the East. End footnote. Jigs and reels, hornpipes, and strathsprays. The citizens of Ispahan are all so light, so brisk, so airy, that a single face of tolerable seriousness could not be purchased among them for ready gold. A stranger would swear these good people had sold themselves to folly of madness. They trip along the streets on their tiptoes with infinite vivacity, and then they snap it with their fingers so cheerily to their own private hummings and whistlings. Nor is the country a jot behind the town in the extravagance of joy on this season of festivity. The nymphs and swains gambolings and frolickings on the green to the shrill, wild notes of the bagpipe, or to the sweet and melodious twinklings of the harp. Now many a courtship is begun, and many a courtship is completed, and, alas, many a simple milkmaid is qualified in the silent grove to complain of flattering, faithless, and inconstant men. And many a lover laughs at the levity of his mistress, and finds happiness in another charmer. These rejoicings continue 9 days, and on the 10th the Sophy, in his royal robes and attended by all his court, rides on an Arabian courier with furniture of green velvet curiously embroidered with hawks, to the beautiful plain of Maluvanera, where he is received amidst the loud acclamations of thousands of his subjects, assembled from all the provinces of the empire, to see the ceremony of swearing fidelity to the royal hawk solemnized. The prince alights from his horse, and passes through the ranks of his guards, to a glorious throne of the finest workmanship, on which he deliberately places his royal body. As soon as he is seated, he is enclosed by his nobles, and verily it is a comely sight to behold a golden hawk and carbuncles with spread wings, nodding on the tip of every nose, but that on the imperial nose is composed of a variety of precious stones, artfully cemented together, which represent the natural colors of the feathers. Now the great falconer advances, tall, erect, and firm, and, placing the hawk on the top of the scepter, pronounces learned harangue on the excellence of falconry in general, but expatiates in particular on the high qualities of the bird, which he had the honor to present to his sovereign lord. He ends his oration with the solemn and confidential wish that the dominion of the hawk may be as extensive and absolute over the forests of deer, and that of the pheasant wherein it fit is over the Persian realm. Then the Sophie, holding out the hawk, orders him to lay the foreigner of the right hand under its pounces, and swear the following oath. I, Pashur Mirza Kobi Mata Lab Kulman, great falconer of Persia, do swear by the beard of the Sophie, by the pounces of the hawk, and by Trebadar Dave, her guardian angel, and I shall be her true and faithful slave, providing her, to the best of my knowledge and belief, in the most wholesome food and most entertaining sport. But if I shall, at any time, so far neglect my charge as that she may be in the least suffered by my carelessness, may I become the victim of her vengeance in this world, and drop at the last day from the narrow bridge into the blue flaming billows, which boil from the torment of all frothful and heedless falconers. This oath is afterwards administered to all the under-falconers and other offices of the royal muse. Such alterations, being made in the form as their respective posts render necessary and proper, then he who is appointed body physician to the hawk cometh forward with a right grave, solemn step, and having undergone an examination on all the diseases and cures of hawks, he is also sworn into his place. Whilst the ceremony lasts, not a cough or whisper is heard to disturb the still attention which is so suitable to his awfulness and dignity. The eager curiosity of the whole multitude is centered in it, every mortal stretching out his neck and darting piercing looks to the important scene. You might in this calm hear the softest down of a feather fall to the earth. The ceremony being finished, the onlookers are dismissed by the sound of trumpets, who, as they go away, wish, in pealing exclamations, the Sophie many such hawks, and an endless reign to enjoy them. This potentate flies these noble birds in vast forests well stocked with deer, which they attack with incredible impetuosity. As soon as they descry their prey from the heights of the air, they stoop on it with the rapidity of lightning, and taking their station between its horns, aim directly at its eyes. The creature, finding itself thus assailed, runs and bounds and tosses its head in order to shake off its enemy. But the well-trained hawk keeps her hold amidst all these agitations, as little molested by them as if she were a part of the animal itself. At last, she not only tears out the eyes, but penetrates even to the brains, and it is the amusement of the spectators to mark the varying turns of the struggle between the deer and the hawk, till the former is killed. Nothing can exceed the care and assiduity wherein the falconers and physicians look after the royal hawks for the penalty of their oath. Whatever may be their state in the next world is inflicted by the utmost severity, as far as it is in regards to the present. If it appear that the loss or death of any of these birds is occasioned by their negligence, the offender is sewed up in the deer skins, which horns fixed to its head, and thus turned out to the rage of the hawks. These, mistaking the disguised criminal for a deer, fly at him with their usual fierceness, pull out the eyes, and put him to the most excruciating death. The dread of this horrible fate renders the officers of the royal muse remarkably attentive and skillful in their duty, and guards the hawks from perishing by any ailment except old age. The attachment of the Sophie for falconry is equalled by that of His Ottoman Highness, who does great honor to the princely sport. This monarch maintains at a very high expense a train of footnotes. The curious reader will find this fact also in Chambers' dictionary. 6,000 of falconers. The lovers of calculation will thence be able to form an idea of the wealth of this prince, as well as of his affection of the sports of the sky. Each falconer is able enough to take care of 3 hawks, and these require 3 spaniels to spring game, and 6 lads to beat the cover. Multiply these numbers then by the number of falconers, and you will see that the august protector of Mahomet's religion has in his pay 42,000 men in all. In his mews 18,000 hawks, and in his kennels the same number of spaniels. The subsistence of 1 falconer, 6 lads, 3 hawks, and as many spaniels is cheap at 9 shillings a day. The product of this moderate sum, multiplied by the number of falconers, amounts only to 2,700 pounds sterling a day. Multiply this daily expense by the days of the year, and you will plainly discover that the commander of the faithful annually lays out 985,500 pounds. This is, without doubt, a considerable deal of money, but I could have made this sum much higher had I thrown into the splendid appointments of the officers of the train. As exaggeration, however, has always been my utter aversion, I have forborne to swell the account with this additional expense, and from the same principle I shall not be angry at any gentleman who may think fit to cut away from the total of the odd 85,500 pounds. The great expense of the Grand Signior's train of falconers would merit no credit, were we not certain that he can command the wealth of many kingdoms to supply it. The bowstring is to him a source of more wealth than the King of Spain draws from Mexico and Peru, and much more within his reach. Besides his fair and established revenues, he squeezes immense sums from the bashaws for their governments. They in turn squeeze the people in order to reimburse themselves, and he afterwards puts an end to the lives of these inferior oppressors for the sake of their treasures. Thus, justice gives him possession of a part of the wealth of his subjects for the support of his government, and he employs tyranny and cruelty to get into his hands the greater part of the remainder. To those, therefore, who consider his wealth, it will not appear extraordinary that he spends a few 100,000 pounds on the manly pleasure of hawking. On grand hawking days, this prince cannot have in his retinue fewer than 70 or 80,000 souls. If we add to the falconers and their assistants the guards and bashaws and spectators who will attend him, but he seldom goes to the field in all his glory and magnificence, nor is it indeed solely or chiefly for his own private amusement that he maintains such a numerous train of sportsmen. He keeps them principally with a view to the posterity of his empire, which they advance very essentially in a way which will amaze those who are not acquainted with it already. Everybody has heard with great admiration of the fierce impetuosity wherewith the Janizaries charge their enemies in battle. But it is a piece of information to, perhaps most people, that these troops owe their egregious bravery to the virtue of 5 falcon eggs, which each man takes twice a week to breakfast in time of war. Hawks are, of all the feathered tribes, the most undaunted and enterprising, and these heroic qualities they communicate to those who eat their eggs. It is superfluous to prove to such as know the wonderful effects of beef on the British soldiery that the fearlessness of the mind is sometimes created, and always promoted by the excellence of the food which is taken into the body. Fill the most timid coward who ever shrunk from the face of danger. Fill him with roast beef and strong beer, and he will run up to a battery of cannon in the hottest fire.
The Turks have two sorts of falcon eggs for inspiring their Janissaries. The one sort is produced by falcons which are fed on ordinary food, and the other by falcons which are fed on extraordinary food. The first sort is allotted to men who possess that share of courage with which nature endues the generality of mankind. But the last is assigned to your constitutional cowards. As for native heroes, they eat neither sort. It may be asked, from a very reasonable curiosity, by what method do the Turks discover the different tempers of their soldiers, so as to adapt the eggs to each man's state of mind? This question merits an answer, and I shall give it before I proceed any further. You must know that in each regiment of Janissaries there are established 6 aged philosophers, deeply experienced in all the modifications of the human heart, in whose hands are put all the young officers and recruits. These philosophers, to the most piercing sagacity, join the most winning candor of heart and sweetness of manners, and therefore soon insinuate themselves into the love and confidence of those who are placed under their inspection, as they are persons of the most scrupulous and benevolent discretion, and left to perform the duties of their office in a way which their own wisdom determines to be best without fear of censure. The youth committed to their security are under no apprehensions of having the weak parts of their characters exposed to the world. Besides, were they once found guilty of such ridiculous folly and unnecessary cruelty, they would be turned with ignominy out of their places. For the Turks are such odd mortals as to reckon backbiting a certain mark of cowardice, and they hate cowardice worse than the devil. The great aim of these sages is to discover the natural and prevailing bent of the young men, and that they may the more easily find it out, they allow them to act in whatever way they please, in all places, and on all emergencies, knowing that the restraint and austerity more frequently teach them to disguise than to correct their passions. By this simple method, they soon arrive at the knowledge of the different dispositions of the juvenile candidates for military fame, and give them such eggs as are suited to their dispositions. Thus, if a young officer or recruit takes pleasure in learning the use of his arms, and keeps them bright and in fighting order, if he obeys his superiors with smiling alertness, and is beloved by all his comrades, if he never provokes a quarrel, nor ever tamely submits to an avowed affront, this character ranks him among men of genuine spirit and courage. But if, on the contrary, he is found to delight in a part of challenging arrangements of features, to affect stately, overbearing, and neglectful manners, to be boasting, vainglorious, and valorous in conversation, to listen to defamatory insinuations, and to be learned in slanderous anecdotes, to treat his inferiors with abusive acrimony, and his superiors with cringing flattery, to be covetous, niggardly, and curmudgeonly, in short, to be very full of himself, and very disdainful to all who would choose to oppose him. Our philosophers declare a man of this silly disposition a coward of the lowest and most despicable order.
Here I must observe that they do not pass judgment on the whole character from single or occasional indications of heroism or pusillanimity, but from the general train of it, there being moments when a hero sinks into a coward, and when a coward feels himself a hero, to his utter astonishment.
I now proceed to explain the way by which the Turks obtain the necessary quantity of eggs, and how they prepare them. The immense number of falconers and assistants, whom I have already mentioned, are cantoned out among the mountains and rocky provinces of the empire to gather falcon eggs during the summer, and to put the areas into proper order the rest of the year, that long flights for food may not fatigue and disable the hawks for laying. Great droves of dogs are sent from every quarter of the empire to the deserts, where they are killed and distributed in pieces at midnight to all the eyries. By this economy, the falcons hardly ever stir out, except when their health calls for exercise, or so being vigorous, they lay, each of them, an egg a day.
They are, at the beginning of the season, permitted to lay 4 or 5 eggs without being robbed.
But every day after, the falconers rob each eyrie of a single egg. The birds, prompted by nature, continue laying, in order to complete the number at which they hatch. And these people continue the robberies, in order to delay the completion of that number. But when they perceive the birds are growing weak, and the season far gone, they allow them to lay the full number to which instinct directs them for the preservation of their breed. In that warm climate, falcons seldom lay fewer than 7 or 8 eggs, whereas in the colder regions of the north, they never produce more than 2 or 3 or 4. As soon as the falconers take up the eggs from the nest, they dip them in melted wax, of which they receive a coat that excludes the air, and saves them from putrefaction. These are the sort of eggs which are appointed for men of ordinary spirit, with a view to exalt them into heroes.
End Part 3 of Introduction. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain.